That famous phrase, "with great power comes great responsibility," is cemented into the Spider-Man mythos. It was first written in Amazing Fantasy number 15, which was also the first appearance of Spider-Man himself, but it often gets attributed to the wrong person. Sorry, Uncle Ben. Welcome to a tie-in video. I'm Scott, and earlier this week we talked about whether great power really does demand great responsibility, but I want to discuss the origin of that phrase. While Peter Parker's Uncle Ben often gets credit for it, it actually wasn't spoken until after he was already dead. In fact, it wasn't even spoken at all when it first debuted. Instead, it was written by the unnamed narrator of the story and was even a bit longer. Originally, it was, "With great power, there must also come great responsibility." That original Spider-Man story from 1962 was not the first place a similar quote has been written. Franklin D. Roosevelt penned a speech the night before he died in 1945 that read, quote, "Today we have learned in the agony of war that great power involves great responsibility." In 1908, Theodore Roosevelt had a slightly different but similar statement in regards to him not wanting to seek a third term as president. Quote, "I believe in power, but I believe that responsibility should go with power." 2 years before that, Winston Churchill gave a speech that outright said, quote, "Where there is great power, there is a great responsibility." We can trace similar quotes throughout history for centuries, but historians are unsure who the original author of the quote was. It's often attributed to Voltaire, a writer and philosopher of the 18th century, but that link has yet to be confirmed as true. The earliest written example of this quote we've been able to find is from an anonymous writer in 1793 during the French Revolution. We know this wasn't Voltaire because he had died 15 years prior. Nonetheless, the quote, when translated to English, reads, quote, "They must consider that great responsibility follows inseparably from great power." I think that actually fits better with the original Spider-Man quote of, "With great power there must also come great responsibility," but yeah. There is also a somewhat similar phrase from the Bible that people like to point out. It's from Luke 12:48, which reads, "From everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded, and from the one who has been entrusted with much, much more will be asked." And I see how that's kind of the same general idea, but I don't know if I could confidently say that that's the origin of the phrase. Still, I thought it was at least worth a mention. Many powerful people echoed this sentiment throughout history, but I'd wager that today, people still instinctually think of Spider-Man when they hear it. They might even specifically think of Uncle Ben. And that raises a question. When was Uncle Ben first attributed with the quote, if it wasn't that way in the original Spider-Man comics? As many years passed after Spider-Man's debut, that lesson about power and responsibility was still taught in the form of a caption box. The first comic book appearance I could find of Uncle Ben specifically saying it was in Amazing Spider-Man number 274 from 1986. That's 24 years after Spidey's first issue. However, the Uncle Ben in this story was kind of a hallucination, plus it isn't clear whether that phrase is something that Ben used to say while he was alive or just a lesson that Peter learned after his death. A short while later, in Spider-Man vs. Wolverine number 1, Peter does specifically state that the phrase is something that Uncle Ben used to say, and that's probably the earliest indication we have of that being the case. However, there is an instance outside of the comics where Peter specifically states that the famous phrase is something that Uncle Ben used to say. It was from a 1972 Amazing Spider-Man rock comic entitled From Beyond the Grave. Essentially, it was an album of songs about the web-slinger that are all tied together by an acted-out story where Kingpin kidnaps Aunt May. It's crazy, it's awesome, it's available to listen to right now for free. I'll put a link in the description. 20 minutes into the story, we get this little excerpt.
"What was it Uncle Ben used to tell me? I remember. He used to say, 'Petey, never forget, the stronger the man, the heavier the load. With great power comes great responsibility.'"
I know what you're thinking, and yes, that is Odo from Deep Space Nine. And there you have it, a brief history of that classic saying, "With great power comes great responsibility." But I want to know what you guys think. Do you feel the line is more powerful when delivered by Uncle Ben as opposed to a simple caption box? Or do you like the idea of Spider-Man learning about it intuitively instead of being told it outright? Let's talk about it all in the comments below. And before you go, did you know that we have a podcast simply titled the NerdSync Podcast that comes out every single Monday about comics and movies and interviews and trivia about those things. So why not go check it out by clicking the card up there if you want to listen to more of me talking each week. More of me than you already do by watching these videos. Or if you want more Spider-Man videos, click right there for one that we put out on Wednesday about whether or not great power does demand great responsibility. So it's kind of topical. You might say it ties in. Get it? And if this is your first time hanging out with us here at NerdSync, consider subscribing to our channel. We make several new videos every week that ask questions and examine comics in a way that I think makes them more awesome than they already are. So make sure you hit that big sexy subscribe button so you don't miss out on anything. Once again, I'm Scott. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram, and I will see you guys on Monday for another episode of the NerdSync podcast. See ya.